On the Security Weekly News, I try to scan and produce a quick look at some of the major stories to help you keep up with what's going on in and around the industry in a short format. Myself, Aaron Leyland, Josh Marpet, and other guest commentators provide greater insight every week. I'm Doug White, and I hope that you'll look for the Security Weekly News in all of your favorite podcast catchers and subscribe for the latest content.
Welcome to RSA Conference. We're recording live from Broadcast Alley here in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Apiiro. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and joining me today is Idan Plotnik, co-founder and CEO of Apiiro. Welcome, Idan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
So I wanted to dive right in. We're talking about ASPM. And ASPM, sure, it's a bunch of letters put together. It's more than just a bunch of tools put together too. Yeah. And everybody thinks like, well, I've got this SaaS, this DAS, these other acronyms. But I think ASPM done properly is more than just hooking a bunch of tools together, right?
Yeah, because these tools actually generate a lot of noise. They don't have the context of the business. They don't have the context of the application architecture. They don't understand the developer's knowledge and activity throughout the history. So this is why you actually need to take all these tools that are testing your code, and you need to contextualize them, and you need to understand what's the business impact to make sense. And out of the tens of thousands of noisy alerts, you need to understand what is actually a risk to your business.
And that's the important premise I really just wanted to highlight, because as you said, tens of thousands. There's so we could play Pokemon, collect all the vulns, all the CVEs. But we don't need to know all of them have to be fixed, right? The whole premise is just, where do I spend my time? And that's actually said from the developer's perspective, right?
Absolutely. This is why we developed a technology called a deep code analysis. This technology actually takes a code repo, scan it, understand the architecture of the code, and augment the vulnerabilities on top of them. Then enrich from runtime, context. Is it deployed? Is it internet exposed? And then we, from the DCA, the deep code analysis, we understand what's the business impact of this code module. And this is how we actually contextualize, deduplicate, and only then, if it's a risk to the business, we tell the developers fix that, because it's the most critical risk at the moment.
And that's what seems so appealing to me, is that you're saving developers time by doing what sounds like more than just, here's the abstract syntax tree of the app that we're building.
Exactly.
But we don't just stop there. We add this context. So yeah, tell me more about this context and why that's so important for the developer.
Sure. So there are multiple layers of context. First and foremost, when you take code and you say, in this line of code you have a vulnerability, it doesn't make sense or to AppSec engineers or developers, because it doesn't mean that it will impact your business. If you say that this is a RESTful API in the code that uses a GenAI framework or a vulnerable open source dependency, on top of that, you augment the business impact of saying this handles PII data. Now, the combination of all these things, this is a RESTful API that uses a GenAI framework in a code repo or a module with PII data that is deployed and internet exposed, and this is the context from runtime, then it's a risk that you need to fix right now. And if it's already deployed, you can attach it or tie it back to the code owner automatically.
That's huge.
Huge. In large enterprises, it's days or weeks to find the code owner and automatically trigger a remediation action to the developer that owns this piece of code or code components like RESTful API.
Yeah.
And with this risk-based context, you can also prevent the developers from merging their code, and not only based on CVSS score 10, because CVSS score 10 can be low risk in your code architecture.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, and I think I wanted to take that line of you're talking about the inventory, because you're saying who owns this. You know, they're very. I think you've been around AppSec for quite a while.
Yeah.
How many applications do we have? Classic problem, hard to answer.
So such a great point, because I think inventory in AppSec is a black box. No one knows. It's a simple question like how many repos that I have with PII data, How many RESTful APIs I have in Java? No one knows. No one knows. So if you don't know what you have in your code bases and where this code is being deployed and delivered, how can you secure it? And we go back to ASPM. You said ASPM, Application Security Posture Management, is the new shiny tool in RSA now. Everyone say that they are ASPM. There are actually 3 types of ASPM. The first one is the shallow aggregators that can take all the vulnerabilities and group them by
TVs. Yeah, okay.
The second type is the ones that started from software supply chain, like CI/CD pipeline, misconfiguration, or source control manager, posture management. And the last one are the deep ASPM that actually can build an inventory and maintain it for every code change and say, today you have new 5 APIs in Java. Yesterday, you added 3 different open API frameworks in your code. This is the depth that you need to take it and then prioritize and remediate with this context.
And that's absolutely where I hear value. I don't need to hear, here's another 5, or honestly, here's another 500 CVEs. Exactly. I'd rather know about those APIs. Like what's meaningful has changed within the code.
Yeah.
And you're talking about like those 3 types of ASPMs. I do want to bring in CSPM, the C for cloud part of this. And how does that relate? Because there is that aspect of inventory with cloud native apps, things like that, but that's still, I think you need both. So tell us why.
This is a great question, because the inventory of CSPM is a totally different inventory items from the ASPM. Okay, the ASPM takes into consideration your API encode and data models and PII and authentication framework and GenAI frameworks and more, while cloud posture management takes containers and firewalls, and these are different entities in your inventory. More than that, when you look at ASPM track material changes in the code, and you can trigger proactively a pen test or a threat model before it gets to the cloud, and then you make your manual processes more efficient, much more efficient. You save time to developers, you save time to risk management and AppSec engineers, and you reduce the risk before releasing or delivering the code to the cloud.
And I appreciate that AppSec loves to talk about shifting left, right, all over the place. I appreciate that you haven't said that yet, because one of the things I want to highlight is that ASPM sounds like it's reducing noise at scale rather than just throwing it back over to the AppSec team and say, was this a meaningful change or not? Should we spend this budget on a pen test? Was this just a UI change, backend change?
This is a critical thing in AppSec, because think about this. You have, let's take a mid-market enterprise, okay? They have 2,000 developers, okay? This is a mid-market enterprise. Every developer commits at least 2 or 3 commits a day. Open at least 1 or 2 open pull requests. A lot of changes. Why do I care about a UI change that changed the color of the login page? I don't care. But if you change the logic of an API, and this API is responsible for authentication, this needs to go through a pen test without bothering the development teams with tedious questions or risk assessment questionnaires that everyone lies when they ask them these questions.
Or they don't even have to lie. They say, well, today, this was the change, but tomorrow the change is different. It's dynamic, right? Well, then that's interesting too. I was curious about who's consuming this, because we're talking a lot about developers, but classically, the application security has the AppSec kind of in there. So is it AppSec team, developers?
So before I will answer, I just want to say that ASPM needs to be deep, but also open. You need to integrate with all the developers' tool chain, with all the risk management tools. And this is, by the way, why we announced the Shine program.
It's what brings you to RSA.
Exactly. So now we are an open platform, but very deep. And we take, like, our user is the application security engineer that defines the governance, the policies, measure the MTTR versus SLA, identify the code owners, and shift not left, shift the data with the context to the developers in their pull request, in their Jira ticket, in their Slack messages.
Where they're working, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to maintain, think about a graph, okay? On one hand, you have the velocity of pull requests and commits and releases going up, while the risk is going down, okay? This is the measurement of a very, very good ASPM that needs to measure the development velocity, make sure that you're not impacting the business, the developers of releasing more features, but you're still reducing the risk without bothering them, and they can release more and more value to the business.
And it sounds like you're being able to reduce the risk without having to put that checklist on the AppSec team to say, well, where is this running? Or do you agree, what's the environmental score of this CVSS? Change this context, right?
I think this is the key of the deep code analysis, the DCA technology that we developed. From deeply understanding what you have in the repo, we can match it to what you have in the pipeline and what you have in the a container, and we can connect directly to the Kubernetes cluster or to your CSPM, which you said earlier, and enrich more data from them and correlate it to what you have inside the code repo, and then do the code to runtime mapping automatically. A shallow ASPM will do it based on tags or naming conventions. But because we can actually understand what you have in the repo, we have much higher matching algorithm between code to build to runtime. And this gives the context that you are talking about, the environmental score of a vulnerability. Or, by the way, it's not only vulnerability, also a material change. If I change from SQL Server to a MongoDB, it's not a CVE, but it is a risk to your business. You change the entire database mechanism. So is it already deployed? Is it exposed to the internet? Did someone run a threat model on it or a pen test? This is like, do you see, like, it's vulnerabilities in parallel to material changes.
And that's why I like to, because you mentioned Gen AI, and a lot of people are like, you could walk the floor and we'll see AI enabled as well, along with everybody has ASPM platforms now. But I think Gen AI has introduced a lot of people to the concern of, oh, right, we have to do something about data privacy or just data handling. And that's something that's parallel to security, but ASPM, I think, can help with this, right?
Absolutely. And I will go back to what you said. Inventory. You go to every CISO and ask, do you know if your developers are using Gen AI technologies? No, I don't.
Right.
So when we scan the code with the DCA, we tell you how many, who added it, when, where, what's the posture of your Gen AI frameworks in the code, and if they are sending sensitive information to Gen AI services in the cloud. This is one angle, like the visibility. The second angle is putting governance and say, okay, in my organization, you can use OpenAI for Java in this version. If not, you cannot merge the code and pass through the build phase. Okay, so a governance piece is very, very important for Gen AI risks. The third angle, which is very interesting, we are using actually LLMs to help with the triage and remediation process.
I see. Okay.
And also detect malicious code in different places. So these are the three buckets where we see ourselves interacting with AI across the board.
Yes, and even consuming AI, which is also nice to hear. And I think the other thing that I don't want to let go by too fast is that turning governance into something execution. Because I've seen a lot of governance that here's this policy doc and fill out this checklist or a spreadsheet. I love that.
Apiiro ASPM, we are literally killing risk assessment questionnaires, and we show how much time you invest on them. You waste the developer's time and the risk management time, and eventually, as you said, it changes every day. So why doing it every 3 months? It doesn't make any sense, and it's not actually assessing the risk in a,
Yes.
in a manner where you can prioritize your vulnerabilities.
And that's a perfect way for us to end talking about time. So
Yeah.
this is a great time, Idan. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. To learn more about Apiiro, visit securityweekly.com/Apiiro. And stick around. We've got a lot more live interviews coming right after this break.
Welcome to RSA Conference. We're here recording live from Broadcast Alley in Moscone West. This interview is sponsored by Imperva. I'm your host, Akira Brand, and joining me today for this interview session is Erez Hasson, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Imperva. Welcome, Erez.
Thank you. It's super excited to be here. Looking forward to be talking to you today about some bots.
Yes, so bots are going to be our main topic of the day. I'm really excited to hear about how they're exploiting APIs and how much trouble they're causing for people and how Imperva is helping. But first, I'd like to hear a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. So first, Erez Hasson, as you mentioned, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Imperva, a Thales company. I've been here for just over 8 years now, and for the past 4 years, I've been working on our bot management solution and our client-side protection solution.
Fabulous. And I want our listeners to know a little bit about Imperva as well. So can you tell me maybe a brief overview of the problems that Imperva aims to solve?
Absolutely. So we protect applications and APIs anywhere at a scale and with the highest ROI. So our application security platform solves for today's most sophisticated and advanced application security and API threats.
Fabulous. And it sounds like your primary customers are AppSec engineers?
AppSec engineers. Specifically, we're going to be talking a little bit about bot. Bot is an interesting topic because the user base for that, just the use cases, extend outside of the securities team. So that's very interesting. It touches on many different teams in the organization.
Oh, beautiful. And Imperva helps you manage all of that as well?
Absolutely. We address that. Yeah.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay. Well, I'm glad that Imperva is actually helping the cyber mindset spread beyond just the AppSec engineering teams. That's fabulous.
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about bots.
Please.
So from what I understand, you yourself wrote a report called the 2024 Bad Bot Report. Tell us a little bit about what your findings were in that report.
Yeah, that is correct. I work on this report for the past 4 years, so this is the fourth one that I've done. Credit for our threat research team and our security analyst team that obviously provide me with a lot of data and insights, and I just kind of merged it all together in this informational piece that helps educate organizations about this threat of bots that I just mentioned is relevant across different functions in the organization. So this report is actually the 11th version of this report. So it's been 11 years that we've been tracking the trend of automated traffic on the internet, particularly bot attacks that target the application layer. So unlike network layer DDoS attacks, for example, obviously there are DDoS attacks on the application layer, but the more interesting use cases of bots such as scraping of data or account takeover attacks, like credential stuffing and things like that. So this, yeah, as I said, it's the 11th version of the report. I have to say that each year I'm always surprised by the data that I'm seeing. I keep asking myself, are we gonna see the trend of bad bot traffic levels increasing stop at a certain point? But this is the 5th consecutive year that we have seen an increase in bad bot traffic levels.
So I want to know more about, we have this massive increase, it sounds like, of bots targeting APIs, doing things like credential stuffing, all kinds of problems it is causing. Do you think that the pace of cyber is keeping up with these bot attacks? And if so, how are they doing that?
Well, it's such a great question because bot management has been around for quite some years now. I mean, we've been tracking that for 11 years.
Right.
And I feel like it's a very common misconception to be hearing, no, we don't have a bot problem.
Everybody has a bot problem.
Everybody has a bot problem. It's just a matter of how much you care about it and how much it impacts your business. And then comes in the thing about what business functions are affected by the bot traffic to your organization. I would say every IT team should care about traffic that they don't want on their website because that's just additional infrastructure costs and strain.
Yes.
So that's one team that always cares about it regardless of the specific industry that they're at. But then you come into the more interesting use cases. Obviously, there's always a security use case because by definition, if you're stopping bot traffic, you're reducing the risk of attacks because essentially most, if not all, attacks are automated. So just by reducing the risk of bot traffic to your website, that is a significant security improvement. But then you get into the more interesting use cases like scraping or scalping, if you're familiar with that, which scalping is essentially if you've tried getting tickets to a very popular show, or
Yes.
have you tried getting, I don't know, very limited edition sneakers, for example. It's very difficult to get because, again, using automation, these bot operators are capable of beating legitimate humans, and that causes a lot of frustration. So there is an impact to the bottom line of the business. That's why it's so interesting, because an organization might come in and say, we don't have a bot problem, or like, even if we do, we sold our inventory, like we don't care about it. But when it comes to users being very vocal and going online to Twitter or X nowadays, or Reddit or something, and just complaining about it, the amount of negative feedback and negative reputation that a business can have because of it is massive. So
my question then for you is when is the tipping point for bots being just part of the cost of doing business to actually being something we should care about?
It's a great question. I think perhaps the biggest issue is if it's really overwhelming your infrastructure, and then it's just sort of like a denial of service effect on your website. So that is a bit of an aha moment for organizations. Obviously, not ideally, but a successful attack such an account takeover has significant damage. Unlike other attacks that have their damage, but this is a very direct damage that can be seen and felt when it's an account takeover and it's successful, and your users are locked out, and you're now in fraud claims and things like that. So that is another big one. And I think one thing that we're seeing now is another interesting topic is also the debate about the legality of web scraping, because of obviously the magic words AI and large language models that use scraping to teach those models on how to interact with users afterwards. So there's a lot, it brought up the conversation about legality of web scraping, and we feel that more organizations today require to protect their proprietary data, because again, we're talking about something that's not illegal. I mean, I just went online a couple of days ago and I found a bunch of bots for hire, for purchasing sneakers, for rotating proxies to make it difficult to detect them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's a kind of a clash between the legality of bots, because bots are legal. I mean, it's just software on the internet. Like, who cares? And then we have Imperva that's trying to stop bots before they become a problem. And then, of course, we have when something really becomes an issue, there's a breach or something like that. So how does Imperva guard against bots becoming a problem in the first place? Or how would you even recommend doing that separate from Imperva?
There's a bunch of recommendations that steps that you can take to reduce the risk or reduce bot traffic to your website. First, you need to identify risks, right? I mean, it's the very basic thing. You need to identify on your website what things bots can interact with that can cause risks. So if you have a login page, obviously you're going to be a target of an account takeover one way or another. And particularly if there's some interesting or valuable incentives behind your user accounts, like financial incentives, e-commerce websites where people save their credit card information or even their gift card balances. So there's an incentive to target that. If you have product pages, it's going to be scraped for pricing or for other reasons. Even account creation endpoints, we've seen mass account creation by bots.
Right.
Yeah, because there's various reasons why bots would want to create massive amount of accounts. Part of it is if they want to commit fraud and kind of distribute that so that it's undetected.
Right.
Other things include, we've seen during COVID, bots create a lot of accounts on colleges to take advantage of COVID relief funds for students. That's something that we've seen. Yeah. And then you can use them. Think of a website that gives you 20% off for your first purchase. Well, if you had a bot that can let you create a bunch of accounts that you could take advantage of it again and again.
Right.
There's a bunch of interesting things that hurt the bottom line of the business. This is why it extends beyond the security team, and you see much more personas having a say in the purchasing decision when it comes to bot management.
Tell me more about the different personas that are involved in this purchase decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Then I would say it depends on the organization. and the pain points, we are seeing, for example, marketing teams taking more and more an active role in the purchasing decision because, again, marketing in the digital era relies on accurate analytics and data. And when you have bot traffic polluting that, it's very difficult to make informed business decisions on where do I put my money on? What campaign do I want to invest in? How do I know that this is actual organic traffic from the users that I want to be interacting with? So marketing is taking more of a place. E-commerce teams, when it comes to launching products and wanting to make sure that it's a fair playground for your users or your customers to be able to purchase whatever it is you're launching that day, and that they don't go online and complain, "Hey, bots got everything, we didn't get anything."
Oh my gosh, I've been the victim of that myself when
You
I'm
have?
trying to find like good tickets to like Red Rocks amphitheaters.
Oh, Red
Oh
Rocks, yeah.
my God, it's a mess. So I'm glad that y'all are
Exactly.
doing something about this.
Yeah, Red Rocks is a good example of I mean, other shows as well, but Red Rocks has a limited amount of seating in there. So
Yes.
there's a classic equation I like to bring up is that high demand with limited availability, it equals bot interest. And it goes across various industries.
High demand, limited availability.
Yeah.
Now, how, well, I'm curious how Imperva calculates that to guard against the bots, and then has there been a disconnect between what the bots themselves are doing, and how have y'all solved that problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the key elements of good bot management is being able to stop bad bots while not affecting the legitimate users in the process.
Yes.
So only filtering what needs to be filtered, reducing user interaction with captchas and things like that. So we have a bunch of transparent challenges that the user doesn't even see or interact with. Of course, some customers still have that conception that they want to rely on a captcha, and we leave that in the hands of a customer to decide on whether or not and under what condition to trigger the captcha. But our bot management has a multi-layered approach to detecting bots. So that includes from the higher level, because we have the application security platform at Imperva. So we get data from across the customer base. And if an attack has been seen on one customer, all customers immediately benefit from the remediation of that attack. And then we have a bunch of machine learning models. We have behavioral analysis, some fingerprinting techniques that essentially allow you to generate a very unique and specific fingerprint for each request.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, I'd actually like to talk a little bit about what should organizations do, whether it's using Imperva or using a different tool, or maybe there's some secure by design things they can do. How would they protect their apps and APIs?
Yeah, great questions. As I said, the first thing is to identify the risks to your application, figure out what elements on your website can become the target of a bot attack that's seeking to abuse the business logic of that. And then the second thing would be to identify all the entry points. We live in an era where the web application is not it anymore. There's a bunch of APIs, and the API usage is growing. API proliferation is a real thing. More and more organizations are implementing APIs. So identify those entry points, APIs, mobile applications, because they are direct pathways to that sensitive data in the application itself. So it's very important to identify those APIs specifically that handle sensitive information and that you know can be abused in order to benefit bot operators. There's the classic things about looking at the specific user agents. So obviously, if you see a browser version that's like 3 years old or something like that, you should probably blocking that. If it's 2 years, you can think about capturing it, for example. Obviously, look into unexplained spikes in traffic. That's a big one. If you see an abnormal behavior on your login endpoint or a specific API that you know, or API or website that you think is not right, then look into that. And then obviously look into identifying headless browsers. So look for actions that took place way too fast than a legitimate user would have been able to. Rate limiting. But again, all of these are things that can help you reduce the traffic from bad bots. But if you have a persistent bot problem, chances are they're going to come back tomorrow with a way to circumvent that. So it really comes down to having a solid bot management solution, like advanced bot protection from Imperva, and also having a bot management strategy that, as I just mentioned, this is a cross-functional concern for many organizations. So breaking down silos and working together with the different teams that have an interest in stopping these bot attacks and their impact is a big one to be doing. Maybe even first and foremost, identify those personas in your organization that it matters to and work together.
So my last question for you before we wrap up is, if I wanted to learn more about my bot strategy, does Imperva have resources that I could learn from?
Absolutely. So the 2024 Bad Bot report just went live. It's a big report. It's a 44-pager, but for a good reason. If you want to get some data from it and just close it, that's fine. But if you want to be more educated on what even is a bot, what's a good bot, what is the difference between good and bad bots, for example, and the bunch of different use cases and how they impact each industry, there's all of that is in there, and it's a great educational piece to go and read.
Fabulous. All right. So all our listeners, definitely check out that Bad Bot report from Imperva. And thank you so much to
Thank you.
Erez. This has been a wonderful live broadcast. And to learn more about Imperva, visit securityweekly.com/ImpervaRSAC. Thank you again, Erez.
Thank you.